Scotland is a land of magic and fairies. And in a time that was long ago, and a time that never was, in a time that is continuing now, and is no longer, and a time that will be again, there was a lass named Janet who lived at the edge of Carter Hall Woods. And she lived in a castle there, for she was the princess of this land. But she grew up hearing the rhyme to stay out of the dangerous woods. And the rhyme said, to all ye ladies with frozen hair, stay clear of the woods, for Tam Lin is there. Tam Lin, it was said, was a fairy knight, for the woods were also the fairy lands. And it was said that if you entered this land and went into the forest, that Tam Lin would appear and he would exact a price for your crossing. And none knew what that price might be. It might be a few coins. It might be your youth. It might be a loaf of your hay. Or it might be your very life. And so none ever went into Carter Hall Woods. But Janet, she did not like this at all. Because Carter Hall Woods was her lands. And she did not think it was very fair that she should be kept from her own lands by this pesky fairy. So bold Janet decided one day that she was going to go into Carter Hall Woods and none could stop her. So she woke up in the morning and she piled her golden hair upon her head and she drew on her beautiful green dress and she went out into the woods. And she sat at the edge of it for a moment and looked in. It looked just like any other wood. And she walked into it. And that was when she realised it was not like any other wood. It was the most beautiful, magical wood she had ever seen. The trees were greener, the wind was sweeter, and the flowers brighter upon the ground than any she had ever seen. So she walked back and forth, exploring these woods that were hers, and she came across a glade of roses. And she thought, these are my roses, and I shall take them. So she plucked a white rose. And over to the side, where for a moment she thought had been the light coming through the trees, suddenly there stood a knight, as if he had ever been there. And she looked at him, and he looked at her, and he gave her a stern frown. And he said, who are you to enter these woods and take from them? And old Janet stood straight and lifted her chin, and she said, I am Janet, and the woods of Carter Hall are mine. And I know who you are. You are Tam Lin, the fairy knight. And Tam Lin cocked his head, and a smile broke upon his face, for he'd never had a lass talk to him like that before. And he said, oh, for a lass as bold and beautiful as you, I will give you another. And he plucked a red rose and gave it to her. And he said, and I would have you know that knight though I may be, a fairy I am not. And she said, how can this be? Why then do you guard the fairies in the woods? And he said, oh, I grew up far from here, but I was a great hunter. And I came to the Carter Hall Woods long ago to hunt the beautiful beasts here. But I grew so sleepy strangely in the middle of the day, and I had to sit myself down and rest. And when I awoke, I found that I was in fairy lands, for the queen of the fairies had captured me and brought me to her realm and cast a spell. And now my will is no longer my own. By day, I guard Carter Hall Woods to make sure that none can disturb the fairies, and by night I must return to her realm. But oh, tonight is a fearsome one. And Janet said, how so? And he said, you see, once a year, the fairies, they must pay a grand sacrifice in order to keep their magic. And I feel that tonight, I am to be that sacrifice. Now Janet, her heart was bold and fierce, and it was also just and tender. And as she looked upon Tamlin, she felt it grow with love. And she said, there must be a way that we can get you free of the fairy queen. And he said, aye, there is. If a woman who loves me were to pull me from my horse and hold tight to me no matter what spells the fairy queen has cast, then the spell would be broken and I would be free. And Janet said, I will be that maiden. And so he told her where to go and what to do, and late that night she crept onto a gorse bush at the crossroads, and she waited and waited until midnight came upon her, and she heard the distant tinkle of bridles and saddles, and the fairies came over the hill. And Tamlin had told her, let 3 companies pass, and then you will see me, with golden crown upon my white horse. So the first group passed, and the second, and then the third, and right at the end, she saw the white horse with Tamlin and his golden crown upon it. And she leapt from her hiding place and snatched Tamlin right off the back of that horse and held him tight to the ground. And a cry went up, Tamlin is away! And the fairy queen at the front of the company wheeled her horse around, and she saw Tamlin being held by this lass, and she shrieked in anger, and she let out a spell that was like the sound of a foot cracking on leaves behind you in a dark wood. And Tamlin, in Janet's arms, turned to a lizard. And Janet, she clutched this lizard to her breast. She would not let him go. And the fairy queen shrieked in her rage. And she let loose another spell. And this one was like the chill upon your back when you're in the swamp alone. And Tamlin turned into a snake. And Janet clutched the snake even as it wound about her neck. She would not let Tamlin go. And the fairy queen was very, very upset at this. And she screamed and let loose another spell. And this one burned like fire upon her brow. And Janet felt the snake in her hands turn to a red hot cinder. And it scorched her hands and tears streaked down her face. But she thought, I can't let him go. And she held him tight. And the fairy queen stamped and raged with her horse. And another spell was drawn from her against her own will. And this was like the sun coming up over the hills and lighting the land. And Tamlin turned back to himself with Janet's arms still around him. And the fairy queen knew she had lost her most bonny night. And she cursed Janet from where she sat on her horse. But Janet did not care what she had with Tamlin. And the fairies marched away, and they disappeared like a mist in the night. And Tamlin took the hands of his beloved and kissed the blistered palms and raised her to her feet, and returned with her to her castle in Hall, where they were wed. And every day they would walk the woods of Hall that were now their own, and he would hold her hand in his. And when it was the time for roses to bloom, he would always pick her a red rose and a white rose for his bonny lass to take home to the table of their castle when they lived there. Thank you very much. I'll now turn the stage to another caller.